Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cook, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more.
Hi, everyone. This is Michael Rochelle, Chief Strategy Officer here at the Brandon Hall Group. And one of my favorite topics and one of my favorite people to speak with is David from Achievers. And we're going to be having an interesting conversation, particularly around the new report. And there's some really keen insights on where things are going in recognition. But for the few people in our audience that don't know who David is, I'm going to let him do a brief introduction.
Thank you, Michael. Lovely to be with you as always. My name is David Bator, and I lead Achievers Workforce Institute. We're a team of workforce researchers and data scientists, and really our aim through our global research programs is to understand what conditions need to exist at work so employees can do the best work of their lives. So delighted to be here to talk to you today.
That's great. And we have a lot to dive into, so I'm just going to jump right in and hit you with the first question. So the report makes what I call a striking claim that AI transformation is accelerating. We all see that, but employees' readiness isn't. And what does that gap actually look like inside organizations today? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, there's actually some McKinsey data that shows that 92% of organizations are increasing their investment in AI, but only 1% as of right now are seeing a return on those investments. Our own research at AWI is suggesting that the gap is really a human gap. Globally, less than 1 in 5 employees feel trained, supported, and prepared for AI. And so I think the truth is that these projects are going to fail if people don't change their behavior.
And I know there was so much data to scrub, and this is kind of putting you on the spot, but what was the data point or data points that most surprised you about being unprepared?
Yeah, I think one of the most surprising things about the adventure of AI is that employees are experimenting on their own. If you think about any other transformation in the history of business, it's usually been pretty top down. You know, the powers that be decide on high what they're going to do, and then they cascade that call to action down to the front lines. And it's always been very much a command and control scenario where the call to action is to comply or else. I think what's different and surprising about this transformation is that it is both top down and bottom up, because employees themselves are dabbling. They're using these tools in their own lives and their own work lives to either offload the tasks that they don't really love or to find ways to get some time back. And I think these twin forces are creating an enormous amount of pressure and confusion for employees. And I think this pressure is among the reasons that a whopping 92% of employees are unclear about what's expected of them at work.
That's pretty compelling. And you made a very unique argument in the paper that it's not a technology problem. It's a behavior and reinforcement problem. Maybe you can expand on that.
Yeah, I think the central argument is that nothing changes if nothing changes. So any transformation fails without changing behavior. And what we see is that it doesn't happen through tools or training alone. It doesn't happen because we really, really want it to or because we need it to. These things don't scale through mandates. They scale through positive reinforcement. And so I think that's one of the key insights from this paper.
And then you also kind of describe recognition as the missing system, which I thought was a very intriguing comment behind the whole AI readiness piece. What do you mean by recognition as a system? It's not just a cultural initiative, is what I think you're poking at.
Yeah, that's right. I think the research is pretty clear that when employees feel seen, when they feel valued, when they feel appreciated, they feel better. And our research shows that appreciation boosts morale and mental health, and it's a sense of belonging. our desire to stay in an organization, our performance, the strength of our relationships. So good feelings are great. And yet, for as long as I've been working, which is just about 30 years, I have never seen a good feeling get funded inside an organization. Warm fuzzies don't get funded. So recognition as a technology is not a system for scaling smiles. It is the most critical system of influence across the entire HR stack. And I can't think of another system that can impact every aspect of the employee experience the way that recognition can, nor can I think of another technology that every employee can have access to, whether they're on the front lines or sitting at the front desk. And so the provocation is that this is bigger than HR. Frequent recognition in particular is the system of reinforcement that makes AI transformation, or indeed any transformation, stick. And I think the fact is that most employees will repeat a behavior if they're recognized for it.
And it's interesting. You kind of make the premise, which I totally agree with. Leaders are kind of thinking about recognition as a nice to have, not as a requirement. What do you think the missing link is? Like, what are they missing about its role in driving transformation? Why is that such a big leap for them?
They probably don't have proof. I think that's part of it. And I think that we see this even sometimes with existing customers who have been with us for years and years and years, where they regard recognition. Oh yeah, that's our thank you program. And what you and I know and what the evidence shows that it's so much more than that. And the proof is that frequent recognition, where AI is concerned, it really reinforces the exact conditions that AI requires. Things like trust in leadership, clarity in moments of change, psychological safety, persistence as we experience disruption. So I think a reframe is in order, which is among the reasons I'm delighted to have this conversation. Frequent recognition is a change agent, and it's not because employees are pushed, but because it's this opportunity to signal to them, to support them, and to reinforce the things that really, really matter.
So we got the big picture now. So it's strategic, it's important, drives transformation, it's got a definable business outcome to it. It's not a nice to have, it's not a fringe benefit. The big question that comes to mind for me then in listening to you, David, is like, how do you take recognition, translate strategy into everyday behavior?
We have a saying that what gets recognized gets repeated. And we say it because it's true. So, we see that, for example, when employees are recognized weekly, they are 8 times more likely to see how their work connects to the bigger picture, nearly 10 times more likely to be aligned to a company's purpose, 14 times more likely to trust their manager. And, it's not just our research that shows this. Gallup's study of nearly 200,000 teams over 30 years points to frequent recognition as one of the key traits of the highest performing teams. And in a different vein, Gartner's research shows that frequent recognition is one of the best ways to embed behavior day to day, particularly in the midst of change. They show that embedding values into the systems, into the workflows, into the processes that encapsulate an employee's experience at work, when you do this every day, it's the best way to drive performance, recognition, and change. And really, recognition is that delivery system.
Yeah, and it's interesting, talking about our research is, as well with that, is that recognition we see as something that also is something that drives inclusion. It drives a sense of belonging, valued opinions, makes people, direct impact on motivation, engagement levels, retention factors. I think it's so important what you're bringing up, like award-winning organizations that we see, like really are starting to say that recognition from their standpoint is really showing employees that you're listening. And that we're really paying attention to what you're doing, and we appreciate, what you're trying to accomplish, the hard work, the effort, the sacrifice that you're making. So it's nice to see that we're finally rallying around something that isn't considered like just a rewards program, spot bonuses or,
You're right.
catching you doing something right. And, we got to get rid of that idea. I also love the idea too that, we see that organizations, to agree with you, are actually connecting business outcomes to it.
Yeah.
People that are recognized for their efforts just are bigger, faster, stronger with what they do every day at the organization. So it's really interesting that I think all around, we're really seeing the value of it. But
Mm-hmm.
we can't not stop talking about AI
That's right.
in the podcast, right? So let's
Sure.
go back to AI.
All
So
right.
we got to switch back. We've established recognition needs to get done. But your research shows AI adoption fails when behaviors don't stick. And what are those specific behaviors? I love that quote that you made, whatever we do, like we can reinforce that. So what do we need to reinforce with AI adoption?
Yeah, there are a number that I think are core. I mean, part of the argument we make in the paper is that recognition helps build the infrastructure that AI depends on. So I think some of the core behaviors are trust, confidence, clarity, resilience. When we build infrastructure in this way, using frequent recognition in particular, this gives people the safety that they're going to need during this period of experimentation to experiment, to know that failing is okay as long as we fail fast and take the learnings with us. It gives us the push to continue to move forward, and also the belief that the things we're doing today matter, even amidst a period of what feels like unprecedented change. So I think those are the keys, trust, confidence, clarity, resilience. Those are some of the key behaviors for the AI.
And this may just be an obvious question to ask, but I think it would be good for the audience to just hear you articulate it as when those behaviors aren't reinforced consistently, like what happens?
Yeah, this is a short answer. I think projects fail. I think people check out. I think people leave. I think we continue to see the misalignment, lack of productivity, all the things we care about get worse when people are not seen, valued, and appreciated for their contribution.
So we talk a lot, there's a new term that a lot of folks are using it, and it's a cool term. It's coming up a lot. It's the term signal.
Yeah.
We're talking about signals now. We're talking about those bellwethers, those blinking things that happen that begin to foreshadow things to come. And your report talks about very distinct behavioral signals, 10 of them, right, that drive
Mhm.
AI transformation. Can you walk us through the few that you feel are most critical signals now?
Yeah, here I want to give a tip of the hat to my colleague Emma Harvey, who leads our global recognition insights practice. And I think there are three from this report that jump out for me: learning, leadership, and alignment, which we've been talking about. So, if I begin with learning, the great Amy Edmondson offered a provocation during a keynote earlier this year, and she said that the future of work was learning. And she wasn't talking about learning tech, but she was acknowledging that we're living through this period of change where every team and every workflow are being impacted. And so, it really becomes incumbent upon organizations to create trust and psychological safety. So as we were just talking about, folks can feel that they can fail fast and move on with the learnings from that misstep. What we see in particular with recognition is that recognition validates that effort and persistence, not just the mastery of it. And when we reinforce progress and learning behaviors in real time, employees remain engaged, and they can remain in that skill building mode even when the outcomes may take a while to materialize. So I think learning is key. I think the second is leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Your employees employees are looking to their leaders all the time, in good times, in the bad times, in the boring times. And what our research shows is that the best managers are great recognizers.
Mm-hmm.
But with the advent of AI, when leaders recognize learning, adaptability, experimentation, they're modeling that psychological safety in action. And so recognition becomes proof that if we try, if we adjust, if we learn, that the organization values these things, and these are not just risks to be avoided. And then I think the last thing is alignment. I talked earlier about our recent research that 92% of employees are unclear about what's expected of them at work. Think about the velocity that an organization is trying to achieve before AI, And now think about it. By some estimates, the AI opportunity is a $10 trillion opportunity. And so if the left foot doesn't know what the right is doing, it impedes our progress. We stand still, or at worst, we fall back. And so what our research really shows is that frequent recognition can make strategy tangible. When appreciation explicitly links work to your goals, to your values, it can translate something that feels really abstract into one of those signals you're talking about, so that employees can understand it, can repeat it, can scale it. And a simpler way to say it is that I think that recognition, frequent recognition, when it's meaningful especially, can be a great sense maker for people.
Hmm. And it seems to have another strong attribute that you bring out, which is it drives better decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe we can talk about that. And then you had an intriguing commentary about data stewardship, but let's tackle the better decision making. Like, how does recognition create better decision making with our
Yeah.
team?
Well, frequent recognition, when it is personal, specific, and impact oriented, and this is what we talk about, that it's not just important that recognition is frequent, but it must also be meaningful. When it's those three things, personal, specific, impact oriented, it's a strong signal of what good is, of a great can look like. Our global data reveals a very consistent pattern, which is that confidence, clarity, trust, they weaken when reinforcement is inconsistent. But recognition changes that for people. So when we use recognition inside every workday, it strengthens the behaviors again that this period of transformation relies on, and it turns really intent into action and strategy into practice. Where data stewardship is concerned, recognition has this opportunity to really surface invisible behaviors that
Mhm.
protect data quality, that whether it's disciplined inputs or verification or careful execution. When we recognize this, organizations turn data stewardship into something that sounds super boring, and is sort of a background task, into a shared expectation that can scale responsible AI use inside an organization.
I love that. And, when you put those together, you just get that sense that when you're recognizing people and they're super connected, you just get a higher level of diligence. People just are like,
Exactly right.
I'm committed, have the highest level of accountability, responsibility. I want to get this. I want to get this all right, rather than saying, hey, you know, I'm not really engaged. I'm not really connected, not being recognized for the effort. So I'm just going to kind of walk through this, and whatever
Exactly right.
happens, happens. But it's so black and white, isn't it? There's no
I
gray.
think
It's
so.
either,
I think
yeah,
so.
you wonder why every organization just doesn't jump on all of this. But
Hmm.
organizations do struggle, and there's a lot of different struggles. So I'm going to give you three to choose from, or maybe there's a combination. But when organizations struggle, is it around clarity? Is it
Mm.
around learning? Or is it around alignment?
That's interesting. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think right now it's clarity, and then I keep coming back to this alarming statistic that 92% of employees are unclear about what's expected of them at work. And I think you're talking about connection. We're living through this period of where I think maybe arguably we're more disconnected than ever. We have more ways to connect than ever, most of them in the palm of our hands, but employees feel disconnected from the mission of the organization, from their manager, from their peers, from their purpose, and from understanding what's expected of them at work. And I think that recognition has this incredible opportunity to connect people and bring clarity in a time that feels pretty muddy to just about everyone.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you bring up, that once you say it, it sounds exactly right. But
Mm.
when you just say it provides clarity, and just leaving it there, it does sound murky, but the way you describe it, it's like, why wouldn't it? I mean, it's an excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's just right there. It is very clear.
Mm.
So let's talk about the idea that we're not trying to say that recognition isn't happening now. Like, there
Mhm.
are organizations that are trying
Yeah.
to do that, but it seems like the frequency of it isn't driving behavioral change is the takeaway from the report.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that recognition happens in different places and in different ways inside organizations. And, we stop people in the hall, or we kick off team meetings, or at our town hall, we acknowledge people who have gone above and beyond. But what the research shows is that it's frequent recognition is the thing that makes people feel better and perform better. And so recognition isn't failing because people don't value it. It's failing because it's not arriving often enough to guide work in the moment. I used to talk about, when I speak to customers, I'd say, the research shows that, there's a major inflection point when as a manager, you're recognizing employees, meaningfully every month. And then I would sort of challenge the customer and say, if you think about it, that is a bar that is so low, you should be able to trip over it, because if you're paying attention every single day, your people are doing things that make a difference in the lives of customers and of colleagues. But you're right. What we're seeing is that it's just not happening often enough. So just 17% of employees say they're recognized weekly. 28% are getting that minimum bar of monthly. And yet what the research shows is that 92% of employees would put in more effort if they were recognized more frequently. And so when it's simple and timely and embedded daily, ideally, all the good things start to happen.
So the obvious question is, why not? Why aren't we doing it more frequently?
I think there's probably lots of things. People haven't developed a good habit there. People worry about saying the wrong thing. Some people don't know what to say. Some people don't know how to make it meaningful. Many individuals work for companies where recognition is not part of the culture. So they have no good models to observe. But when I think about it, I don't know, every single day, as I was challenging earlier, I'm seeing people do things that make a difference in my life and the lives of my colleagues. And I 100% have 30 seconds to call that out and to share the impact that it has. So all these things are real, but they're excuses, I think.
Yeah, and it kind of brings us to that idea that when we do it, not as frequently as they should. Or, someone does something and you got it in your head and you're like, I really got to get to them and say something, and then you let too much time go by and it gets delayed. There's a real impact to that infrequency and lack of consistency and delay. But in all the things that we talked about, what do you think is that biggest impact when we don't get this right?
Yeah, I think people, I was talking about it earlier, I think projects fail. I think people check out. I think we miss opportunities to shape behaviors, to confirm priorities, to impact performance, and at the highest level, to confirm for someone that the things they're doing today matter. I can't think of another period in my work history where mattering has mattered more. And so that's a big miss to me if we're not taking a moment to call that out.
Yeah, and it's an interesting too that, all this value that we're bringing, it also helps people to stay calm, centered, focused, stable, anchored in the moment. And we see that quite often, right? And now when we look at this boiling pot of AI transformation,
right?
Again, going back to what we talked about earlier, this can't be a nice to have. Like, this is another major change, disruption, kind of look at things all over again with a different light. How do we make this go from something nice to have to like operational critical with supporting something like AI transformation?
I think the boiling pot. I think you're exactly right. It's we're living through a period of what feels like unprecedented change, and not just because it's pervasive, but also because of its pace. It feels to me faster than anything I've experienced before. Outside, our companies, we see disruption that is cultural, economic, geopolitical. Inside an organization, most organizations are living through 2 to 3 major transformations all at once, all competing for the same human energy. I shared earlier, most employees are not clear about what's expected of them at work. And one of the other things we've been tracking as a practice is change readiness since 2020, and we've seen it just steadily on the decline since then, to where right now just 23% of employees feel capable of managing unexpected challenges. And yet the turning the frown upside down, when employees are recognized frequently and meaningfully, they feel better, they perform better, and their confidence to manage change or whatever might be lurking around the corner, it soars. So, this is not a system for scaling smiles. This is a system of influence that connects people to the behaviors that matter most through this transformation, but probably just about any transformation.
Yeah, and during that change period, maybe you can make it just a tad clearer for folks. How does recognition directly play in to keeping people, stay the course, be productive, be confident, be in the moment? How does that play out in a very disruptive change environment?
Yeah, because I think it's because it's a consistent system of positive reinforcement. When I think of, you and I were talking about rewards earlier, and so often in cultures, and I'm a big baseball fan too. We love home runs, but there's, all the new data talks about getting on base, being more important, that it's a team game, and we play team games. And I think that recognition has this opportunity not just to celebrate the person. I'm mixing my sports metaphors here, but it's an opportunity not just to call out the people who heroically, reach the top, but it's also a system that can help propel people forward as they're on their way to the top.
Right.
And so, as you're on your way, when you look at how performance is distributed in most organizations, like maybe 15% of your people are the top performers. The rest of your organization, the bulk, 60, 70%, you're trying to turn into top performers. And this becomes that sense maker, that system of good feeling that can provide clarity on, what good looks like, what the gap between good and great looks like, and give people the confidence to keep on keeping on.
We've kind of talked about it in a couple of different threads, but to kind of hit it head on, we got this manager effect, right? And your report clearly shows that managers are a primary reinforcement channel, but they oftentimes don't feel recognized. That's a big, the gap is there. It's a critical gap. But why is that gap there?
I think there's a bunch of things to untangle. I think that, first of all, we sometimes forget that managers are employees themselves. I talk a lot and write a lot about an organization's responsibilities to create conditions so that employees can do the best work of their lives. And that's inclusive of managers. Managers are also on the front lines with people doing the frontline work, coaching them, cajoling them, celebrating them. Our research shows that, frequent recognition is one of the 4 traits of highly effective managers, alongside frequent contact, coaching, and career development. And our research also shows that while recognition from your peers is something that can cement and signal culture, manager recognition is the thing that cements that commitment. And that's what I always think engagement is about. Employee engagement is really about an individual's commitment to do the job that they're paid to do. And so managers here have an outsized impact on that every single day.
Okay, so I'm a leader of a management team. I'm looking across the board at my managers. What's the rethink? What's the reset button in terms of driving this AI adoption, doing the whole recognition, reinforcement? Where do I start? What's different than the way I'm approaching it now?
Yeah, I think that you're going to want to look into frequency, first of all. We've been talking about it quite a bit. I think the baseline is monthly, but as I was saying earlier, that's a bar so low you can trip over it. So I'd really be looking to weekly recognition, and looking in particular at the very specific conditions inside your organization that you are trying to establish or to confirm. Lean into recognition here. This isn't like the extra gesture. This is a signal to leaders and for leaders that you're present, that you're attentive, and that you're capable of guiding teams through this period of uncertainty. So I think it's a critical tool in the toolbox of managers at this stage.
Yeah, with the way AI is and adoption and the level of change in behavior and how I feel about it and everything else, I mean, that kind of brings things all into focus. Got a couple more thoughts
Sure.
for you as we wrap up. So I think you've created a structure, pillars, foundational elements as to why recognition is the engine behind AI adoption. Is there a way to articulate, if you don't get it right, like what happens?
I think these projects are going to fail.
Okay.
I really do. And I think that coming back to what I was saying at the beginning, nothing changes if nothing changes. And what we see is that organizations continue to pour gas on their AI investments, and employees are feeling left behind. And so there has never been a more important time to highlight human contribution and make sure that we're doing the things to allow our people to succeed. I will say that, AI is not going to transform your organization. People are going to transform your organization. And so it's time to get the people part right.
I think that's so on point because we are kind of driving that AI adoption is independent of humans,
Mm.
and we're just more like saying, okay, they could operate autonomously and we're looking like where the bridges are. But what I like what you're saying is that we've got to keep people connected.
Absolutely.
In general, because whether you want to be successful in anything, it's going to come down to the human element, and the human element's going to drive AI adoption. If you have disengaged, unrecognized, unstable, disconnected people, then you're right. It's just going to come down to, failure items across the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And right, those mistakes could lead to tremendous risk for the organization,
Absolutely.
setbacks, all sorts of things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we always have to leave the audience with the recipe, right?
Okay.
Or the first steps. So what are the first 2 or 3 things that organizations should do differently, like starting tomorrow, if they want AI adoption to succeed?
Yeah, I think the first is that the gap is not a technology gap, and it's to acknowledge that AI transformation, but probably any transformation, fails without behavior change. And that has everything to do with what we've been talking about this entire time, which is the people. And I think the second thing is that it may be surprising to people, but frequent recognition is the engine that can enable that behavior change and do it at scale. My mother-in-law often reminds me that it's nice to be nice. And that's true.
Right.
Frequent recognition makes people feel real good, but it also helps them perform better. And so I think a reframe that, recognition and reward here are not the cherry on top at the end of your AI transformation project. They're the system that drives it.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting thought, too, that you just brought up. It just jumped into my head that there's a craving and a hunger or a thirst. It's going to be even more so than ever for people to reach out and say, am I getting it right? Like, can you just recognize, like I'm trying my hardest? And it's an interesting approach that you just brought up there at the end, with the idea that it doesn't take a lot to be nice. It doesn't take a lot to just really feel you're reinforcing that behavior. If you are getting it right and where you're not, like, I'm going to be there to help you. We oftentimes think about recognition as being some kind of like bestowing of an award or a certificate or like something. But recognition is just listening and acknowledging and helping people through where they are at the time. And I love that paradigm at the end. I mean, that's great. We could talk about this all day, couldn't we?
We're due for another catch up.
I think it was outstanding, David, what you did is that connection between something is disruptive and just intense is AI adoption, that if we can get back to the basics of recognizing people and making them feel like they're part of this, and that what they're doing and how they're going about doing is super valuable, I think it's a great, a great thought piece for people to kind of say, this gives me something tangible to do. Like AI adoption, I might not know what to do about the adoption itself, but I do know how to stay connected and recognize my people that are going through it. So I think it's been very enlightening, and it's a great report. So
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you and to share.
yeah, we'll have to do a follow-up later on the year to see how this
Sure
is
will.
all coming together, as AI changes every hour of the day, right?
That's
So
right.
we'll
That's right.
see how this all goes. But again, David, thank you. Thank you all there. Michael Rochelle, Brandon Hall Group. We really appreciate your time today and look forward to our next podcast.